Hello, and welcome to the Observability Trends webinar series. I'm Grant Swanson, your host, and today we will dive into the topic of navigating regulatory compliance with observability. Now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Senior Sales Engineer, Keith Buswell. Welcome, Keith.
Hey Grant, thanks a lot for having me today. So just getting right into it, navigating regulatory compliance with observability, a modern approach. Immediate here, there's three things I really want to dissect just from the title of this webinar today. Regulatory compliance, what is that? What does that even mean? Set a little bit of a baseline there. Just make sure we're all on the same page what we're talking about. But then doing it with observability and a modern approach. So what do all those things mean inside of here? So just getting into the first one is that what is regulatory compliance? And really these are the rules that a company should be following to make sure they're taking care of their employees' data, their customers' data, partners' data, and it varies. So if you're in banking, for example, there's going to be some differences on some of the things that you should be doing there. Healthcare, for example, and things like HIPAA, NERC SIP, and with critical infrastructure. So it really depends by the industry that you're in and what type of regulatory compliances and kind of measures that you're going to have. And it covers much more things outside of just logging and what workloads should be running and things like that. But it even goes down to like HR type of policies and stuff like that. But it goes very, very in depth. But for the purposes of today, I really want to discuss what it means, to do it with observability. And it can even depend on geography. So for example, if you're living in the EU and GDPR is going to be important to you, if you live in Australia or even California, there's going to be different laws that you would need to adhere to on what type of data, how long you keep it, what you do, and how are you securing that data as well. So there's a lot of variations there, and which kind of leads me into this next portion is what makes it so difficult. I've been in the logging realm, I would say, for right around 10 years now, a little bit over, but and every time compliance comes up, it's always, it seems like it's a bit of a difficult thing. And some of the reasons is that it varies so much, depending on your industry. What type of things should we bring in about your customers? As a matter of fact, your own customers themselves can have impact on what regulatory compliances that you should be adhering with. You could have multiple regulations. You could have a different type of a tool stack in your product stack. Could mean that it's like, hey, the products we're offering means that we have to have we align with multiple regulations because of the type of customers that we serve to, and then of course location. But another thing that makes this difficult is that traditionally it's been pretty expensive to adhere to as well, and some of the reasons for that being is things like long retention. I think like PCI, for example, with like 90 days readily retrievable, but 1 month or 1 year of kind of backup or an archive. And so, just saying 90 days readily retrievable, and that could be achieved in various ways. But essentially it's saying, at any point, I need to be able to go ask this question about the data that is, in the PCI scope, and make sure I could, retrieve that data quickly. And that, not, anything with that first 90 days, but then a year after that, you can have something a bit of a colder state. That adds complexity as well, because, for examples just like that, well, I know the first 90 days is here. After that, I need to go over here. And how do I interact with that data? Do I query it the same? Does everybody know how to access that? So there's some complexity that gets added to some of those things. And sometimes it can be a lot of data. Depending on how large your environment is or what your business is and the services that you offer up, it can be very expensive and to do some of these things. And then sometimes, I've even seen like, hey, we're just hosting something internal to just log all this data. So, and that's fine. However, now you have infrastructure costs. Somebody needs to maintain that environment. You got to make sure it's up to date. And if that has data coming into it that has maybe PCI or HIPAA related data as well, now that's in scope as well. And so it has to adhere to the same kind of things that we're trying to log from in the first place. And then if you're not doing things right, sometimes there's some very large fines that are wrapped around this as well. So just some things that I would say that have come up over the past 10 years that I've seen that have just made this kind of a difficult problem to solve. And it even comes down to, like, hey, I know my industry, I know my customers, I know the regulations, and then really kind of getting down, okay, so now, exactly what data is it that I need to be collecting? How am I going to get that data in? And, where am I going to store it? How am I going to store it? So there's a lot of questions to ask there as well around some of these steps. So some of the things that I've seen as options of that have tackled this problem in the past. So one of them is just using your existing logging or observability tools. So I have a logging background myself. So I've seen this attempted, but I would just say previously, so I would say some of the pros around this is that a lot of the different platforms that I leveraged had their own agents. There was an existing pipeline going into the logging platform, and you could just kind of piggyback off of that. More often than not, that data was already being collected. Maybe there were some additional things that you needed to bring in, or remove some filters to allow that type of data that meets your regulations to come in. And then often, you'd have some type of option to archive that data. I could say if that you see this data, go archive it over here, and we're not going to use it. And if we do need to use it, maybe it's like a rehydrate or a reindex type of function that you would use. So there were some of those pros. The cons is that most of the platforms that I've leveraged in the past, in some fashion, the ingest that the data that you were bringing in that was tied to directly your licensing cost. So it's like, okay, you're bringing in, say 100 gigs of data per day. There's a cost to that. So your costs would go up to bring in this type of data, and it could be very expensive sometimes to just bring in data. It's like, hey, I just simply need this for compliance. I don't feel like it should be that expensive. I don't even really plan on interacting with it that much. So it created some very expensive scenarios depending on what you were trying to do. And then also, like, if the data was archived off, which was sometimes an option, it would become cumbersome to use it. It's like, okay, where is that data? What's the process of going about interacting with that data? Can I just query it where it's at and it's slower? Do I have to re-ingest that data and put it into an index and then make it available inside of there? And then sometimes even bringing that data out of the mechanism that it was in became very expensive as well. So it just like with the complexity and so it's never been a very easy problem. Another option that I would see is kind of one of the things I already mentioned was building appliance logging pipeline. So it's like, hey, whatever team has their own logging observability tools, we're going to go build our own thing that's just for compliance, make it super cheap storage. It could be, obviously more cost effective than commercial off the shelf. You're not locked into vendor collection pipelines and stuff like that. So you have something that's very, repurposed and kind of easy to, take from one scenario, one environment to another. But some of the cons, once again, now we have somebody that has to kind of maintain this environment. Some of the upfront costs and building a pipeline, a lot of times I would see it something like backed up into S3 buckets, for example, or just building some type of routing pipeline that would dump into some type of blob storage. But there's an upfront investment to that because some of the things that you have to understand is, okay, how are we going to collect that data? What tools are available to grab that data? How are we going to build the pipeline? How do we route it? And there's also costs associated with that as well. And a lot of times I was interacting with those type of scenarios. It's like, hey, we're just going to go put it in like this S3 thing, and then maybe use Athena or some other mechanism that will allow me to search my blob storage. And a lot of times it was slow. Um, I think the query language more than not wasn't terrible. It was kind of SQL based a lot of times, which I think is a very common query language, and a lot of us know it. But also, it wasn't very intuitive, I would say. It was just kind of is what it is, and you just kind of dealt with it. And then I would say one of the big downsides for me is that when that data was collected and it went into somewhere else, you just really didn't have an opportunity to correlate that data with anything else anymore. It lived on an island. It was in its own silo. And for the most parts, that was okay because maybe the data didn't have a ton of value and correlation capabilities inside of there. But there was every once in a while, it's like, it would be interesting to see how this is tying into the things that are in my observability or my logging platform. But really, just didn't have an opportunity to do that because it just kind of lived on living on an island there. So those are some of the things that I've seen just kind of throughout my tenure with just logging and trying to see these different compliance and regulatory use cases and some of the different ways we went about trying to solve it. So taking a bit of a modern approach to this. Now, what does that mean? So some of the things that I'm looking for nowadays when I think about, oh, hey, I have all this data, I want to bring it in, but there's a lot of scenarios I want to leverage cloud native architecture. There's a lot of economies of scale of being able to dump stuff, like I mentioned, like into S3 storage and stuff like that, and have stuff that's very elastic compute. If I want to go interact with it, if I'm interacting with a lot, be able to scale up, be able to scale down, have unlimited storage, be able to have very cheap storage as well. Also, I don't really want to think too much on how I want to ingest that data. And so schema agnostic, what I mean by that is, for a lot of examples, some of the tools that I've leveraged is like, oh, well, as that data comes in, it needs to pass through this pipeline, it needs to hit these parsers need to extract these fields. And if you don't do that, then really it's difficult to interact with the data once it's inside the environment. Sometimes you can't even really interact with it at all. So it's like I just don't really want to think about that too much. I just kind of want to throw the data in, and if I do need to create some type of schema or extract some values later or want to do something with it, I could do that at any point I want. I think this is just kind of a more nice to have, just considering some of the things that I've leveraged in the past. A flexible data collection pipeline. I don't really love being married to proprietary agents. The agents typically work well, I would say, but the problem is that if for whatever reason you kind of break up with that vendor, and then now you're left in a scenario, it's like, okay, now we need to go redo that work. We're putting out new agents and configurations, and so I really want something that's flexible, that can leverage an existing pipeline that I'm building. So for example, if I'm leveraging like FluentBit agents or Telegraph or Grafana agents, kind of really anything in that open source realm, I really want a platform that can just consume the feed from those agents, just like I would be doing if I was building my own open source pipeline and putting it into there. So I want to be able to reuse the pipeline that I've built. And then, of course, cost effective. That's a big one, right? That's one of the biggest reasons that one of the biggest things that I've seen in a lot of the architectures is that, hey, you kind of bring in this data, it's attached to ingest, and it's going to be very expensive. So something that's cost effective to do this as well. Now, what does this mean for Observe and doing it inside of observability platforms such as Observe? So really, one of the key components that we've been able to make things very, very cost effective, but also very performant, is the concept of separating storage from compute. We're using both when we're interacting with data and we're ingesting data, but really they're kind of serving two different purposes, and one really shouldn't necessarily, from a licensing perspective, be associated with the other in some scenarios. And I think compliance logging is a great use case for that, because if you think about it, I have all this data that I'm bringing in. I'm really probably not going to interact it with a whole bunch, so I'm not going to be using a whole lot of compute, but I might be using a lot of storage. Well, I really maybe only just want to get charged, mainly for the storage and not so much the compute. So being able to decouple those two things from each other is one of the key architectural components that Observe did when we designed this solution. So what does that look like? So starting with compute. Now on the left, this is kind of what I'm used to in the past. So data is going to come into your platform. It's going to get put into these storage tiers, for example. We're going to talk a little bit about storage here in a second, but everything was tied together. So it's if you brought in more data, the compute, the storage, it all scaled at the exact same, essentially the same size. And that bill, the license that you got charged, it was all tied together. And then sometimes there would be tiered storage, for example, something to reduce some of those costs. But now it also created complexity. How do I query that data? Do I need to do it in a different way? Does the query language even the same? Do I have the same capabilities? I'm going to dive in that a little bit more here in a second, but we really wanted to decouple those two. So starting with compute, is Observe is hosting several data warehouses on the background. So when you go run your queries, and one of the key architectural components is that we partnered with Snowflake to deliver the back end of our product. And so with that, we have really low cost storage. And we also have very elastic compute in the fashion of these data warehouses that we're running in the background for you. So now when you go run a query, we can look at the data that you're interacting with and go pick the appropriate size data warehouse and a sliver of that to go run your query against. And as we're hosting these resources, if some of these resources aren't being used, we can scale them down. Or if we say like, oh yeah, there's a lot of queries happening and maybe I'll only have one XL large available right now, I might want to go back it up with another one. That way that everybody's getting the exact compute they need at any given time. But we can scale those resources up and we can scale them down. But we don't need to tie the compute and the storage together, and also be very performant anytime you go run a query as well by doing this. Now, so the way that we're achieving this is that we've adopted the concept of a data lake. Now, that data lake for us is essentially going to be S3 storage that's going to be feeding into Snowflake tables. And we're going to show that a little bit in the UI here. But one of the
key foundational things we've done is we've aligned with an open source collection pipeline. So as you go deploy your Telegraph agents and your Beats agents or whatever it is, you can keep using those. You can repurpose those pipelines that you've already built. We're partners with Cribble as well. Great tool to be able to pipe data into us. So it's just a really flexible platform to be able to get that data. And then also with things like AWS, as you could deploy our apps. In our apps, not only is it going to have dashboards and things like that for you to use, but the entire collection pipeline is also built into our app. So when you deploy the app, you're also going to get all the tools to get in that data as well. So it becomes very easy. It removes that burden of having to think about, hey, how am I going to get this data into the platform? And kind of how I interact with that data. So a lot of nice things baked into that. But as all that data comes inside here, it's going to go live inside essentially S3 buckets in our platform. And it doesn't matter what it is, if it's a log, a metric, a trace, everything business contextual data all lives inside that data lake. So it reduces some of that complexity that you might have. Like, okay, well I have to put this type of data in this type of index, I have to put this type of data in this type of index, or it goes into this type of backend database. So all our data lives in the exact same spot. Also, all of our customers get 13 months of retention by default. So just out of the gate, that's what we give everybody, and a lot of times like, oh wow, that sounds expensive. But the way that we can decouple storage and compute, and since we've partnered with Snowflake to deliver our back end, one of the things that is really nice about our platform is that we average about a 10x data compression. So if we're talking in terabytes, if you figure for every 1 terabyte that comes into our platform, we're going to compress that data 10x. So matter of fact, if we even leverage like a number like 10 terabytes, because you kind of using a nice number that we know will compress nicely. If we use if we have 10 terabytes of data coming to our platform and we compress that data at 10x, now this is where our monthly storage charge would come from. And this is just piggybacking off of publicly listed S3 storage rate. So 23 cents a gig per month. So $23 for every terabyte that you bring in. So you can figure for every 10 terabytes I bring into the platform after compression, I'd be paying about $23 a month for that data. So very cost effective to bring in a lot of data and just store it inside of here. Matter of fact, this is even more cost effective than I've been able to do it with my own S3. Like I want to put it maybe to another vendor platform. I could do it cheaper. I haven't found that to be true. Is that I can, since we charge post compression on the storage, it makes this very, very cost effective and very appealing to be able to store the data inside of here in a hot, ready to search state all the time. There's no tiered storage. You don't have to think about where it's at or anything like that. Make it very, very, very compelling. So with that storage, some of the different things that I've seen in the past, obviously, is that you're going to have your hot storage and maybe, say, what's called 7 days. We keep data in there 7 days, and now it goes into warm storage, stays in there for 30 days, and then everything after that maybe goes into cold. And this is kind of what I've been used to doing, but once again, that complexity comes in. How do I query that data? Where does it live? Can I even dashboard off that? Or like what capabilities do I have when it's at these states? So a lot of that complexity came there, but for us, it's just cloud storage. It's all hot, it's all really treatable. So if you have 13 months, if you go interact with that data 13 months from now, and you interact with that very first data that you brought into the platform, it's going to behave and it's going to respond the exact same way if the data that it was ingested this morning. And that's one of the big foundational concepts is that we want to make it really easy, we want to make it very performant and also cost effective, and these are some of the ways that we'll be able to achieve that. So what I would like to do now, just considering kind of logging and like just compliance and regulatory, it can be a little bit difficult, I would say, to demo that. But there's a couple key foundation things that I brought up inside of here that I'd like to go interact with and do inside of the platform for you. Just to kind of show you, like, hey, this is what I mean by, like, there's no tiers and everything works exactly the same with each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back out of here, and we're going to go inside of one of our observe tenants inside of here, and I think this is a little bit small, so I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and what I want to start with is over here on our applications. So one of the things that I mentioned is just hitting the easy button. It's like, hey, you know what, I have this regulatory compliance, and maybe for whatever reason, like me, data that lives inside of your containers, workloads are running in Kubernetes, I need to make sure that I'm retaining that data for a long amount of time. So when you go deploy our apps, not only is it going to have dashboards and the different modules to go create data sets from the environment and go create all the specific things that you want to interact with, but all of the collection mechanisms as well are built inside of there. So we mentioned that we align completely with open source agents. At the end of the day, you might not be open source collector experts, and that's okay, because we are. And so what we've done is that we've based open source agents inside of our modules. Matter of fact, every module in here has the agent baked inside of it. So when you go deploy the AWS app, for example, all of the things to get that data in are baked inside of the app. And that's true for all of our apps inside of here. So that's a really nice way to really get up and running really fast. And you just don't have to think about how to get that data, what mechanisms and the configs and things like that. It's all done for you. And now as you deploy these apps and you start getting the data in, this is that data lake. So all of your raw data is coming inside of the environment right here. And you can see, like, for example, I had the AWS app deployed, I had the Azure app deployed, some of these other ones inside of here. So at any point, I could just come in here and go take a look at AWS, for example, and I could go open the data set and look at the raw data. So if a lot of compliance is going to say, hey, you need to be able to prove that you have the raw, unmodified data for X amount of time. And as I go open up these raw logs and I start by just listing through these is the exact feed of data coming from our AWS account in its raw format. So you're very easily going to be able to access that. And I'm going to come back to this in here just a second, but I want to show that you're always going to have the raw data available to you inside of here. The other thing that we're doing is is that we're building a navigational guide of your environment as well. So if I go open up the dataset graph, for example, and I say, okay, well, all of the Kubernetes data that I was bringing in, we create this GPS guide essentially inside of here, and you can kind of see how everything that's related is linked together. And for compliance purposes, there might not be a ton of use cases around this for you. However, it is a really nice thing to add because the other thing is, if you want to build just strictly a compliance pipeline, I want to dump data into some platform and keep it very cheap and never really get to interact with it. Observe can be fantastic for that. However, there also is a scenario. It's like, hey, you know what? My team, we also want to kind of we want to democratize our data. We want to, do all the regulatory compliance things. We want to put that somewhere, but it needs to be in the exact same spot that we're already collecting all our other data. So for like our developers and maybe the security team, and we want it all on one platform. And then that's where when you start letting everything live together inside of here, not only is it super cost effective, but we can also do some really cool things around that data once it's inside here for your developers and your engineering teams. And we have some other awesome webinars that really go into depth about all the cool things that you can do, so I have to recommend taking a look at some of those. But going back to compliance, I just wanted to show like how, not only is the data going to come in here and it's not just doing nothing, is that we also kind of create this navigational guide of your environment as well. So a couple things that I like to talk about, especially just from a compliance standpoint, is that there's going to be some really nifty things that you can do. So if I come into our log explorer right here, one of the options, so just kind of think like payment logs. Maybe I'm in an industry where we have payment logs. I can see I have the clear text credit card numbers listed right here. I have the CCV listed here as well. Now, for all intents and purposes, more often than not, I don't even want to bring in this data to begin with. So a lot of things that we would do at the collection level is like, hey, let's identify these patterns, let's just drop that from coming in. And that's perfectly viable. There's some scenarios that's like, I didn't even really know that data existed inside there, and Observe can help you with trying to remove this data from the platform as well. But there's also a scenario where it's like, well, you know what, I need that data, I need those logs, because if I start to scroll over here, I also have like this nested payload inside of here that talk a lot about like, hey, what's going on with that transaction, and my team might need that to troubleshoot. But what they don't need is they don't need these credit card numbers. And this is where I brought up that flexibility that I mentioned earlier. You have the ultimate flexibility to really kind of do anything that you want with the data inside of here. And I just don't really want to think too much about the schema. So one really nice thing that you can do inside of here, and you can do it at any point you want, is that, so for example, like, I'm seeing this credit card number inside of here. I want to publish this data set in a way that my team can use it so they can troubleshoot what's going on with these transactions inside of here, but they just don't need this. And so one of the things I can do is, for example, I'm going to come up here and go to actions. I'm going to say, let's open up a worksheet. And a worksheet for Observe is a bit of a Swiss Army knife. You can create runbooks inside of here, troubleshooting workflows. It's a bit of a playground where I can, kind of start adding additional data sets and making correlations. So it's just kind of a really nice area to do some of the things, but also I can start customizing this a bit more as well. And the data like right now looks exactly like I was looking at instead of Log Explorer, except for I can come in here and give this worksheet a title if I wanted to. But the other thing that I could do is, for example, if I come over here and go to Opal, and this is the Observe Processing Analytics language, and it's going to bring up our query window here, is now I could come in here and do something like drop column, and I'll start typing credit card, and it's to say, okay, you want to drop your credit card number? But yes, but I also want to drop the CVV number. And now when I go run this, what it's going to do is it's going to go grab all that data, but now I don't have a credit card number, I don't have the CVV number, but I have all of the data that my engineering team or developers need to troubleshoot the issues inside of here, and all of the raw telemetry is listed here for me. And one really cool thing I can do is I can now come over here, I can say go publish this as a brand new data set, and we'll just say logs for developers, or whatever. We can create this. Naming doesn't really matter too much, you can name this whatever you want, and now when I hit publish, what's going to happen is that I can now go lock down my original data set payment logs, And we could say that maybe there is a compliance team and maybe they need this information and they can come in here and access it. But the other team comes in here and accesses the developer logs so they can do their job. But it creates just a super flexible way that I can drop columns and I can manipulate the data and I can do things like that at any point I want. And I don't have to think about reindexing. I don't have to think about schema. I can apply schema on demand whenever I want inside the platform and use role-based access control to go lock down those data sets. So that's one thing that I thought was really nice when I was interacting with this. And then we also have the flexibility. For example, I could come inside of here instead of doing this, like, well, I really don't want to drop the column. Maybe we want to redact the payment logs inside of here. And so one option that we chose in this avenue is instead of dropping the column, is doing more of a hash. So just go hash that credit card. And so now inside of here I can see it's just kind of a random number that I'm taking a look at. And so that's a nice option here as well. It's like, okay, I know that there's a credit card number inside of here. I can't see the credit card inside of here. And also maybe we're going to do something more like this where we're just more doing like a pattern replace. Like, okay, that CVV number, just go put stars over top. I know it's a 3-digit character. I know it's going to be some combination of numbers. Just go find that and put stars over top of it and then we'll publish that as a brand new data set. So just really flexible and being able to do those things inside of here. So, for compliance use cases, those are just some common ones that come up. It could be HIPAA-related data. It could be credit card-related data. You can kind of really think about all the different scenarios where it's like, okay, I really want to drop this column, and here you guys can go use this, or I want to redact something. All of those capabilities are inside of here. They're all built in, very easy to use, and be able to publish these new data sets for whatever use cases might be. The last thing that I wanted to show for you today was the fact I mentioned we don't have tiered storage. It's all hot. It's all ready to go for you, and it all interacts the exact same way. So what I want to do is go back into the data streams that I showed just a little bit ago. And if we come inside of here, I'm looking at so the first time I received data from somebody 4 months ago, 3 months ago, I went for 6 months ago. So my Kubernetes data set, there's data stream that's coming inside of here. We started ingesting that data about 6 months ago. And I opened this up, it looked like that I get about 5.2 million data points per hour inside of my Kubernetes data. So a pretty decent amount of data. And what I want to do is I'm going to say, hey, I want to go bring back all of it, all 6 months of that data, and I want to go interact with it, because maybe something came up, or an auditor is asking me a question, and it's like, hey, just show me that you collected this data, and I want to go maybe do some certain thing with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, let's go open up that data set. And it's going to open it up in something that's very resembles the worksheets that we were just interacting with a second ago. And by default, you can see like, okay, well, here's your past 15 minutes of data. And if I look down here at the bottom, that brought back 1.2 million logs in 1.5 seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, you told me that the data goes back 6 months ago. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come inside of here in date range, and today is, so today's the 14th. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, okay, let's go back out, let's go back this out, and let's go to 23, and let's go to December 1st. And let's go see what data is available, all the way back there. And if it's not available, there's no data, and let's still return. So I'm going to say, bring back everything. Let's go do that. And so now what it's going to go do, okay, so here's our results. So we're already done. 12.2 billion logs in 2.6 seconds. And I can see down here, minus 21 weeks ago, minus 17 weeks ago, I can kind of see a little bit of a time series chart inside of here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I don't believe you. I don't believe that I have that data and brought back that quick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and go sort earlier to later. And now as I come inside of here, so December 1st at midnight, is that we can see if I go open up my raw data right here, just like I showed before, and I start tabbing my way through here. This is the full fidelity raw data as it was sent inside of here. So it's not just metadata, we're able to interact with very, very old data just as effective as it came in this morning. And the other thing too is I have all of the same capabilities as I did with any of the other data. If I wanted to say extract from JSON, for example, I want to go grab some field from here. It's going to drop me to the playground again, that Swiss Army knife, the worksheet, and it's going to say, well, what do you want? And let's go grab that container name ID, the container name. Let's go extract some field from the object, maybe like the API version, whatever. Just go pick random ones here and hit apply. And now it went and built that query language I was talking about, and all of those fields that I extracted are now listed right here. So container names, I can come in here, start doing filters off this. I only want to look things that are related to Kafka maybe. And this is all interacting with the data that has, been in here for, 5+ months. And it's in its raw format, and it's doing it the exact same way as data that showed up this morning. So, I hope you found this informative and maybe shed some light on some of the ways that we can, maybe help you improve your regulatory compliance logging, make it easy for you, make it cost effective as well, but then also be able to interact with it in a much easier fashion than just dumping it into something like an S3 bucket. So, hey, appreciate it, Grant, and back to you.
Thank you, Keith, for the excellent presentation and demo. We encourage everyone on the webinar to go to observeinc.com and request a demo or sign up for a free trial. You're also welcome to join us at any of these upcoming events, as we will be at the DevOps Con in San Diego. We also have a technical hands-on observability workshop on 5:30. And don't miss us at the Snowflake Summit for our breakout session on building a modern observability platform on Snowflake. This concludes our session, and thank you for your attention.